And we are live. Welcome back, everybody. This is Jeff Rosales here on the TVC podcast, where we focus on business, personal development, and leadership. For those of you who joined us last week at the 14th Annual Veterans and Small Business Trade Show recap, it was one of the most powerful gatherings of leaders of community, government, and in the business world, all to serve our nation's veterans. And if you recall, Albert Renteria always hits on making sure we get transitioning veterans into successful careers or in business. I mean, he even had a laptop ready to get those veterans who haven't filed their VA claims in like 20 years to file their VA claims. It was like a mandatory, let's do it. Or if you're a small business, get certified, right? And it's a great way to get people more into economic opportunities. So today's guest, which I'm really excited about, it's my first time getting someone in the service that's about to transition out here. And let me tell you, this is I take great pride in being able to do this now, because I always talk about, and we always talk about this as veterans, is making sure veterans are successful when they transition out. That is the best thing that we can do as taxpayers, as citizens, as Americans, to make sure that America's heroes have pathways to success, to raise a family, to grow a business, or to do whatever endeavor that they feel like they want to do and continue their current contribution. Service does not stop when we take off the uniform. So this next guest, his name is Jose Duran. He's in the Navy, and he has a very powerful story. If you guys remember on the Alva podcast yesterday, I mentioned over a fifth of Medal of Honor recipients are immigrants. So we have to make sure we continue with that pipeline. And I'm really excited to have him on. I think he has a lot of insight, cultural insights, leadership insights, and also we share some home origins here, him and I. So I'm looking forward to dive in and all that, and making sure that this hero has pathways to success, right? And I'm gonna hold myself accountable, and I hope you guys do as well. So Jose, welcome to the podcast.
No, well, thank you first off, Jeffrey, for having me here on TVC. I mean, really is an honor, like especially having this long time to be able to like get this set up and actually be here to be able to talk to your listeners and just get some questions answered. And I mean, other than that, I mean, can't really say much. I mean, whenever you're ready, just start asking questions and I'll answer the best I can.
Oh, absolutely. But we do more conversations, Jose. I mean, you're still learning a little bit of that, but we go into the conversation. That's when the questions come in here to do that, right? And I know you're still on the active side, but I'm very excited. One thing is talking about your background. I think a lot of folks can relate to your story. So why don't you walk us through that?
Man, well, I mean, I guess I'll just do a quick introduction about myself. So Jose Duran Urrutia, Jose Duran, however people know me as. I mean, still active duty, Navy, been in for 12 years and just about to transition out. So, just looking at different opportunities. But one thing that's interesting about the whole situation, I guess I got a quite varied background, right? I'm an independent producer and production for podcasts. For IE Productions, my YouTube channel, and the ESL Sessions and Sound Bits. I also I'm still a rookie tattoo artist, but that's all within like those two business standards and marketing. And like I said, been in the Navy for 12 years and originally not from the United States. I actually was born in Mexico, in San Luis Potosi of all places, and grew up a little bit in Zacatecas.
Yeah, so my Marine buddies always tell me like, oh, so you don't have a Marine Corps tattoo? I was like, no. So Jose, hopefully if you grow from being rookie to professional, maybe we could have a conversation one day, and I can finally get my Simplify tattoo that all my Marine buddies have not given it to me yet. So let's talk about those origins. Is where I was getting at is, so you grew up in Mexico, and then you came to the States when you were young, I imagine.
Yeah. So born in 93, San Luis Potosi. My parents, they both are actually originally from Zacatecas. Right. They were out there mid 80s, early 90s. They met out there in the main city of Zacatecas. They had my older brother, and my dad was actually in the military. He was actually infantryman in Mexican military. And I think it was after his 4 years of mandatory service, he got out, and him and my mom were just like, hey, we're going to try to see where we can go. There was opportunities in San Luis. They ended up going out there. Boom. Couple years later, I think like about a year or two later, I ended up being born. 93, we were there until about, as far as I can remember, till 95 or so, about 94, 95. And then that was actually around the time that my dad actually immigrated to the United States. Better lives, better opportunities. This was still during the Clinton era. Around that time, my mom, it was just me, my mom, and my brother. So we were there, San Luis Potosi. We had family members close by. Zacatecas is literally just like you're like, for me, I grew up in Nevada. It's like you're going across the state over to California. Simple as that. And yeah, so times were hard. My dad left. It was still a little difficult. He's still getting his footing up in the States in like 96, 97. By 98, it gets crazier than anything else. It's like we can't support ourselves. Money isn't flowing in. It's not lasting. We go back to Zacatecas with my family members, and that's just a little thing about both being one Mexican, but I think just the Hispanic community in general is like when you're struggling, you go back home. Mom and dad are always there, families, cousins, and everything. So we were there, and unfortunately, my mom actually did end up leaving less than 6 months after to be able to reunite with my dad, stabilize ourselves and get ourselves set up here in the States. So she left in 98, and me and my brother, we grew up there with my grandma, my cousins, all the way up until 99, when me and him, we crossed the border with my grandpa, a couple family friends, and we ended up in northern Nevada, in the Reno, Tahoe area, in between. If anybody's familiar with the Fallon base, you pass by a little rinky-dink town called Fernley, Nevada, going on your way to Reno, to Lake Tahoe, and grew up in that area. It was an interesting time, especially being an undocumented immigrant, first off.
Yeah. So. And again, thank you for your service, and thank you for your father's service. It's interesting, before my dad passed away in 2017, we were going through all his archives, and I noticed he had a little reserve Mexican military, and we're like, how come dad never told us about these things? Because he was a bracero. He came, right after World War II, post World War II, there was a big program called braceros. So it brought a lot of families over here for labor, because there was a shortage of men to be able to work the fields. But it was interesting that my dad, was in the Mexican military as well. It's just something he never talked about, and I don't know why. But it's great that you come from a family of service, international and American, and I think that's great. And your struggle is something that we can all relate to, especially economics, right? A lot of people come to America for economic opportunities. What's interesting too is a lot of folks that migrated from Europe were also poor economic migrants that came. So again, there's a lot of commonalities we have. I think we just need to make sure that we can dispel those myths, as a lot of people like to talk about. So you grew up in Nevada. I was on the other side in California, in Fresno, and I've been to Tahoe. You can't really see Nevada from there. The only time you can either go to Nevada or Vegas. That's the only time. That's the only thing people remember about Nevada is Vegas. Yep. Like, other than that, no one considers any other part of Nevada, even though it has a lot of desert. Area 51 and all these other things you see on sci-fi. What was it like growing up in America? Did you play any sports? Did you have any early stories where maybe you got some mentors before you joined the service? I feel like a lot of folks have certain reasons why they joined the military. Like for me, there was nothing much more for me in Fresno. If I probably would have joined, I don't know if I would have made it past the age of 19. Growing up in a blue collar neighborhood, rough neighborhood, probably would have got my high school girlfriend pregnant and probably would have went to JC and then dropped out. Right, that would have been a typical path for me. And I said I have to do more. So it wasn't until a couple years before, when I was younger, in 8th grade, 9/11 happened. That just left the imprint on me. And so kind of the seeds were already being planted there for me to do something different. So I'm curious to know kind of what your experiences are in Nevada and why you joined the military.
Man, I mean, well, for one, is like people really do, like you said, people really don't know anything else outside of Nevada other than the mob started Vegas. Anything above Clark County 702 area code is pretty much non-existent. And if you're somewhere up north in northern Nevada, you're pretty much in Northern California. but no, you're right. And it's funny because I tell people, a lot of people, and I've met like maybe 3 or 4 people that are actually from Nevada. And as soon as I ask them like, hey, where are you from? And they say, oh, I'm from Pahrump or I'm from Vegas. I'm like, dismiss. You're not in real Nevada. You're nah, but just joking. But yeah, but that's pretty much what like you mentioned, anybody outside of the States. I mean, maybe a little bit outside of like Fresno, like you say, like where you grew up, Sacramento, Deer Lake, or like the Roslyn area where we actually had a lot of family that lived there. It's pretty interesting. It's, my parents, like you said, my dad was military. A lot of the influence with them growing up as military, same thing. He didn't really talk about his service. It would just always come up every so often whenever we were watching movies, and it'd be like Rambo or First Blood or Predator. Him and actually my grandpa on my mom's side, they were actually both military. My grandpa, he was actually a field medic, not a combat medic, field medic for the Mexican army in his time. And then my dad was infantryman. So I had 2 different types of influences, but it's something about, I don't know if it might just be the culture or just the way that the military was still looked at in Mexico at that time, that you didn't really speak about your service. You didn't really have that, I guess, that pride, we have here in the United States. And so whenever I would get like inspiration or any information from them, it'd be, like I said, out of the movies or asking questions or just some random things. Like my dad's like, oh, that's a FAL, or hey, that's a machine gun, that's a 9mm, hey, that's a sniper, like that's a cover position. And then my grandpa, some medical stuff here and there. But it was really rare because like I knew they were in the military. I aspired to be in the military because of them. And then obviously influences of movies and TV shows. And so growing up in Northern Nevada, like you said, in Fresno, there's nothing. Like I know people from Fresno. I've driven through Fresno. It's like Northern Nevada is kind of the exact same way. Is you have Reno being the main area, Tahoe the resort town, and then Fallon being the airbase. But in between those 3 major locations in that part of Nevada, like there's absolutely nothing. There's the mines up north. There's a couple new developments at the time in 2000s. In 99, when I went to Reno, when I first got into Reno, it's like, all right, it was still growing. It was still a small town city. And then once we moved in 2001, in January of 2001 to Fernley, Nevada, that's when you really notice like, hey, this place is really barren. So one, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a very close-knit community because everybody knew each other in that community. Fernley and Reno were essentially inseparable to a certain point. Somebody always had family in Fernley or Fallon. Somebody always had family in Reno, but the community was so small, pretty much everybody knew. You knew somebody's cousin of a cousin of a cousin, and we were lucky with that. But at the same time, is like there's really nothing. There's really no opportunities out there. So a lot of people did join the military. A lot of people's first exposure outside of movies and the popular culture was the air base or even the National Guard station out there in the Reno Tahoe International Airport. So that's where a little bit of my decision to join the military was like, hey, you know what? I want to be able to join the military, be like my parents, be like my grandpa, my dad, and do that stuff. But growing up in a small town, there's very little things to do. You can get in trouble very easily. There was some gang activity, but it's more kind of like it's just transitionary. So there's definitely drugs out there. There was definitely bad influences, and there was a couple things that make it very questionable to live a straight life. Luckily, like I said, I had community, I had family members, and I had friends, and we stuck around. So from middle school all the way up until high school, just try to keep my nose as clean as possible, and just put it like that. And yeah, played sports or played soccer, just like any other Hispanic Mexican kid out there. Participated in quinceañeras. I was the chambelán in most of like the ones in our generation, and then same thing, worked up under the table jobs. Couldn't because I didn't know anything about, hey, you have papers or you don't have papers, what's a social security number. But because you're not really exposed to things when you're in school. But at a certain point, you kind of start coming to a realization like, hey, the opportunities that I have in this town, even though I'm basically an American, aren't the same as my other peers that were born here or of other races or nationalities that are here legally. So at a certain point, it kind of dawned on me, like, you know what, I'm going to make every single opportunity and step to be able to succeed one way or another. And luckily for me, my parents had already divorced at this time, and my mom remarried to my stepdad, who was he's actually a native tribe member of the Paiute community out there in Wadsworth, Nevada. And he has actually said I was very fortunate to have grown up with him. It wasn't really a father stepson situation. It was more kind of like, hey, you're an adult, I'm an adult. We treat each other with respect, and I can't step a certain line. But he did teach me a lot of things. He taught me a lot about, accountability, being able to provide for your family, and being able to provide for the people readily available that depend on you. So one of the things that really did stick with me about him, like how much of an influential person he was during the 2008 financial crisis. He struggled. He struggled a lot. We struggled a lot. And in seeing a lot of the parallels right now with like our service members, our active people, or even just veterans, like lining up to food banks and going to go ask, or depending on like SNAP services and WIC and things like that. It's like I grew up on that. It's like I grew up on that. And I took a lot from the country in those ways and those benefits, right? Because readily available programs and things like that are what actually help out rural communities. So what was my option from the influence of like how prideful my stepdad was? It's like, hey, we don't take handouts, but we work for what we get. Me and my mom, we'd go to the food banks, to be able to feed us and the family. But my stepdad was one very, very direct in the way that he was going to do things. He wasn't going to take a handout, but unemployment and working and looking to try to find jobs, he was there. So we got through that. I got that financial bout. And then finally, like closing into me graduating in 2011, around 2009, 2010, he's like, hey, I think it's time. I give you the opportunity. I think it's been long enough that we've had problems and situations, but like, I want you to succeed. He eventually told me that, but he's like, I want you to succeed. So him giving me the opportunity to sponsor both my mom and me to gain our legal residency, our green card. I navigated that entire system myself twice before the age of 18, no legal assistance or anything. And that's what actually gave me the opportunity to be able to join the military, because I had me and my best friend at the time, we had been talking to Navy recruiters and like, hey man, we're going to be Navy SEALs. We're going to go out there, do some cool stuff, and get to the recruiter's office and like, nope, can't do it, man. You have no social security card. You have no legal residency here in the States. What can we do? Absolutely nothing, unless opportunities and options and routes to be able to get legal status. So like I said, I was very fortunate with that, and I navigated it. And eventually, after a couple years, because it does take some time, I was able to get my green card, go back to Mexico, go back home after 13 years of being undocumented, after 13 years of not seeing my family. And that's where basically most of the rest of my life basically begins, is from that point on. Like all the struggles in the past, they made so much of a difference to where I actually ended up right now at this moment. So,
and that's a great testimony to, if you really want to achieve something, you will figure out and find out a way to achieve it. We have a very bureaucratic system, so navigating it is, it's tough. It's not easy, but it sounds like you did a very successful job, and you joined the world's greatest Navy, right? I have grown to love the Navy a bit. I understand your guys' mission is very important now for trade and diplomacy. And so now the jokes are aside, but I mean, you guys are doing some phenomenal things, and I think it's awesome that you joined the world's greatest Navy, and I think it's a testament to that. And it sounds like you already had those seeds again planted on, right? Your stepfather, accountability, responsibility, growing up in a food desert, and seeing there has to be more, the influence of movies, right? Of course, movies is the reason why a lot of people join. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of more millennials or Gen Zs or Gen Alphas joined after seeing the second Top Gun, which I think, by the way, is not that great compared to the first Top Gun. I'm always a big person on the first movie that comes out.
I'll fight you on that one. I will fight you on that one. Maverick was good, but the real ultimate best military movie from that era is not Top Gun. It is Navy SEALs with Michael Biehn and Charlie Sheen, period.
Okay, I have not seen it, but I will write it down and I'll
No,
make a note to see it.
it's
And
decent. It's actually pretty. It's kind of like the exact same way that they did with Top Gun. They did a lot of things, but like it's of its time. But like I do like Top Gun. Top Gun was interesting, but I've worked with the aviation community, and even they're like, yeah, that's the only reason I became a pilot, or that was the only reason I was able to get into it. It was like I can't. I'll give it its props, but man,
that, hey, I'm just saying that was one of the most successful
yeah,
marketing campaigns,
oh
recruitment
yeah,
campaigns ever, without having to send and hire additional recruiters.
hmm
By the way, the DOW now has, I think, what, 10, 20 billion, $30 billion they allocate
oh yeah,
to Hollywood.
on.
They
Mhm.
actually have offices in Hollywood. Like they have
Yep.
active duty field grade officers there managing the PR communications for the War Department, as it is now called, which is, I think, is pretty interesting.
Oh yeah.
If you really think about it from that perspective, and it sounds like you have a lot of well-rounded knowledge, and it's great. I'm not sure if you're an avid reader, but let's a little bit talk about the world's greatest navy, and some of your experiences. I'd like to learn. I like to learn more about that from your lens. Is what were maybe some deployments you did, or something that kind of made you who you are today?
Well, to start off, a lot of my mentors. So one thing that I didn't get into talking about my early life was I actually had a lot of military influence even in school. So no recruiters or nothing, but my first ESL teacher when I first got to the United States and we actually moved to Fernley was a Vietnam era vet. So Mr. Theodore March, Ted March, he's outstanding. This man is an incredible person and like every young individual, I'll put it that way, you have your perceptions and your reservations about teachers because like, all right, what's this old man going to teach me? What's this person going to do? Tell me about life that I've experienced so well. And one day I it was during middle school, like there was these mandatory ESL sessions that we do counseling, and I walk into his office and I see a picture of him in the Riverine Squadron holding a 240 in the Mekong Delta. So, and I asked him, I was like, "Hey, sir, I was like, you were in the military, you were in the Navy?" He's like, "Yeah, I was actually in Vietnam. Did a couple tours here and there for that time, and then I got out." I'm like, "Man, I was like, that's interesting." I was like, "What did you like? What did you do?" And he didn't really want to talk about it. He's like, like you see that picture on the boat? Yeah, I was out there on the boats and I had the guns. Like, and I thought, like, man, that's the coolest thing possible. There's this other military veteran here, and I didn't know they were called veterans at the time. And I was like, man, he's doing some pretty cool stuff. Look at him. And he's like, and he's in the quintessential garb at the time, Dixie hat, blue dungarees, and what do you call it, the khaki shorts, but holding a gun is like, that's freaking cool. So from there, I was like, I reached out to him here and there, but there was no real major influence outside the military. He didn't sell it to me. He didn't tell me. It was just like I studied his character as the teacher and the influence that he was, and he's one of the biggest reasons why I joined the military. And then outside of that, there was also a couple other teachers, and one of them was a Marine reservist. I can't remember his name, man. For the life of me, I wish I could remember his name. But same thing, he had the old mean Marine gruff. He just came in, no BS and everything. But you sat aside to him and you asked him, like, "Hey, sir, like, what's going on?" All I can remember is like we called him Mr. K. He preferred to be called Mr. K rather than his full name. He's like, "Yeah, I'm in the Marines, Marine Reserves, did this, did that, and everything." And same thing. It's one of those people's the types of influences that don't try to sell you on the image or try to sell you on that. They'll tell you what you need to know, but let you make your own decision. So those two influences are what led me to the military, and it wasn't until after my first tour of service here in out in Norfolk, Virginia, um, was where I had a little bit of experience with like the way that the military worked and things happened, and the experiences that really led me to really kind of start questioning a little bit about like, hey, there's a lot of pride and things to it, but like you have to stand up for yourself even in service. Like rank means a lot, but respect means a lot more. And It's actually during a lot of the situations out to sea. You know, we go on a ship. I was attached to USS Anzio, and on my first deployment, we were out there doing, you know, coasting along and everything. And it was one thing that was very specific to like you said, to leadership and mentors and things with my military experience, that I actually butted heads with my E6. So for us Navy guys, your LPO, right? For you guys in the Marines, I think it's either your department sergeant or your platoon sergeant.
Staff sergeant, yeah.
Staff sergeant. So yeah, so and when it came to leadership, it's like, all right, I thought he was a cool guy. He was a cool dude and everything, but just a specific incident where it's just like, hey man, you're in a position of power, you're in a position of leadership, but the way that you approach the situation, it just wasn't how it should have been done, right? So we were out there, and I was studying for our specialty pin, right? Our special, not special warfare, our surface warfare pin. So you have to get a surface, a pin for every community that you're in. And I was studying down in the barracks, down in our living quarters, and he comes out of nowhere. I'm sitting there. I've already been studying for like 2-3 hours. He comes out of nowhere. I'm sitting there right in the living room, have my head and my hands above my head, just resting, closing my eyes. He comes in just hot as hell for no apparent reason. Just, hey, Duran, what are you doing, man? It's like, get your ass to studying. I'm like, I am. It's like, I am, petty officer. I'm not going to name names just because, but he's like, I am, petty officer. I'm just taking a break. It's like, well, from my side, it doesn't look like you're actually studying. It's like I am. It's like, I'm just taking a quick break. Just close my eyes. Like, well, you're sitting there on the couch in the living area in front of me. It's like, I don't see this. I don't see any of this going anywhere. It's like, you're not studying. So, you know, perception. And I'm just like, and at that point, I'm just like, no, like, I can't take that disrespect, regardless if he was my LPO, regardless if he was my supervisor and things. Like, there's a level to the respectability of it, right? So I got into his face. It's like, I'm studying, and we had a bit of a heated altercation, right? Outside of that, I learned another specific lesson that my dad told me when it comes to like leaderships and just like military experiences and everything. Is just like, one, you have to be a good soldier before you're a good leader. You have to learn how to follow as a soldier before you can learn to follow as a leader and be a good leader. And that right there told me, is like, man, this man has no respect other than the fact that, hey, if he sees something, he's gonna jump on it, and it's gonna be one of those things. And I was like, yeah, no, that wasn't a good experience. But like I said, so just with that leadership portion, is like, that was one of those where I'm just like, this is not a good fit, you know? And it kind of soured a little bit my experience in my first years of being in the Navy. You know, first deployment out there, we're having fun, we're getting to experience, but at the same time, it's just like, hey, at a certain point, rank won't matter. And it wasn't the first time that I had to butt heads with higher ranks and everything, but like, rank won't matter when you're being disrespected. And then one very particular, very specific detail was that we were an all-male ship, so there's already high tensions there. It's like the entire crew was all male enlisted, and it happened to be that we were out to sea, and you know, we call it fan room counseling, we call it alternative forms of discipline, whatever you want to call it. But there was a couple incidents here and there, but it's like, and that was one of those where it's like, it had to turn to it. And it's just like, but after that, like, I learned to understand the Navy perspective, but just the military as a whole when it comes to leaders and to the way that the experience of being in the military is. Because a lot of my time outside of the weird or just the really soured parts was awesome. Like, got to go on my first trip overseas, pretty much visited most of Europe. Left, came back up and down the coast, got to know the most northern part of the United States, up, down, south to Florida. Not all the way to Miami or Gitmo, but, you know, pretty close. And then on my first deployment, like, we were circling around the Mediterranean, and that right there was one of some of the most interesting times being in a conflict zone. We never received fire upon or anything. I don't have that combat experience, but like, it's interesting seeing the dynamics and things that happen with being in the military. And then the most recent deployment, for like full on deployment for me, was in 2023, a couple of years back, being attached with special warfare as a combat service support. We were actually out in Africa, unnamed country for specific reasons. And it was one of the first situations, I'll put it like that, that a lot of the training really does come up, because being where we are, there's a difference between interacting with the type of communities that you do, and in one of those situations, like it came down close to, hey, there's possibly going to be an attack on us. There's a likelihood that this can happen, and you will have to step up. So I got it. At that time, I was like thinking immediately, I'm like, hey, you know what? Do what you can to defend your brothers and sisters. Do what you can to be able to defend your contractors. Here, the people that are providing you the services to be able to sustain yourself, and then make sure that you're holding up the responsibilities. You know, the responsibilities of coming back home. And it didn't dawn on me until after the fact. After the fact, I come back a couple months later in December, and I start talking to my wife, and I start kind of reminiscing about it. I'm like, man, that was a real tough situation where, like, you weren't thinking about, hey, all the bad things that could happen. You were thinking about, hey, all the things that you're prepared for. And then that's another thing that my military experience has both taught me out here in the civilian world, as well as in just in service in general, is like you fall back to a lot of your training, and you don't, it's a lot of it is very second nature, whether you're out there pushing paperwork like I was, accounting for personnel, or you're out there really slinging bullets and mortars. It's like when things are about to hit the fan, and you're making preparations to be able to both defend yourself and to be able to defend your fellow service members, is like you fall back on your training. There's very little second thought about it. So
correct. And you gave some really great examples. You said a lot there, and but one of the things, going back to, you mentioned that experience, right? Sometimes we deal with conflict differently. Sometimes we can be a little emotional when we deal with it, or we feel that this person has crossed the line, across the boundary. And those experiences, I think, are some of the best experiences for us. And here's why, right? Because a lot of times we do remember good leaders, but it's always the bad, because we learn what not to do. Mm-hmm. I used to have this when I was going through NCO, non-commissioned officer course. One of the instructors, he was the lead instructor of the whole course, was a former drill instructor. He said, look, you're going to take the good from the good traits from the good leaders, and the good and the bad from the bad, and just make sure that you know what not to do, and you get the good from the good ones, right? And don't get me wrong, there's some bad leaders that they may exist bad leadership traits, but they are very good maybe at management or technical, or some, maybe they're just not people persons. There's a lot of people that are not, right? That's why they say leadership has no title or rank. Mm-hmm. And so it's always, being a servant leader, part of being servant leadership. And it's something that is difficult, right? Because there's people that you're right, to your point, they get put in positions of authority, and now that's how they identify themselves everywhere they go. I am the founder and CEO. I am the commanding officer. I am, blah, 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 Admiral such and such, General such and such. But then when they take it off, now they're back in the civilian world. Now they get a rude awakening again. They're like, hold on, I can't identify myself as Admiral again or General again. It's like, no. You're now Bob. Yeah. And so, it's good. It's not a bad thing that we go through this experience, because now you know how to deal with conflict. And the other thing you talked about is very important as well. For some reason, it reminded me of my parents. Sometimes I was very hard-headed growing up, and, a lot of things I end up getting in rough situations. I was like, oh yeah, mom told me that like every single day. Dad told me that. And then in the military, it's like they always tell you, like, why do I have to tie my shoes a certain way? Why do I have to roll up, my trousers? Like, why do I have to button it a certain way? Why do I have to go from left to right? Or why do I have to do all these things, right? But then when you get to a real world environment where it's hostile, you're like, oh yeah, sergeant's right. He's right. He's right. Or petty officers, right? He's right. I didn't agree with him or her at the time, but she's right. That did save my life. My training did save my life. So it's great that you were able to fall back on that and use that. And now it sounds like you're using that more now towards your post-military career. And it's great because, you get the leadership traits, and now from the organizational management skills, you're also getting that, knowing how to deal with people, knowing what motivates them, what inspires them, what is their purpose. But before we get kind of to your post-military career, I do want to talk about a topic, citizenship through service, right? I think this is something we should talk a little more about, because a lot of folks don't understand that, again, the military is made up of immigrants, and the military will always be made up of immigrants, going back to before America was founded. A fifth of Medal of Honor recipients are immigrants. So, that is something we should not shy away from. So, what was your navigating skills? I'm sure you were successful. If you're successful with your legal, you're probably pretty successful with your citizenship. So, you probably got your citizenship in the military, correct?
Yeah. So definitely. I do think you bring up a very specific point and very seldom talked about topic. And that's one thing that actually do have experience with, which is a little bit, I guess I don't really know how to express it, but like, you're correct. It's very different being I guess what you would consider the quintessential service member, right? You see a lot of the imagery and things like that, but then you really go into service and you're out there, boot to boot, freaking lined up on the flat top with everybody, and it's like you have everybody from all over the world. And I think that's still a lot of things that people don't understand. It's like service, at least in the United States military, is so varied and so wide that people don't really know how people even get there, right? But talking on the whole immigration portion is just like, there's the misconception that if you served in the military, you automatically get military citizenship. Sorry, that's not the case. You have to first be under legal status to be able to even enter into the military, much less even consideration to qualify for it. So at a minimum, have a valid social security number, or be a green card holder, or even be a visa holder, right? Very specific, because there's other legal precedences and other avenues to be able to kind of skirt that part of the system. There's waivers and things like that. So for me, after I completed my immigration paperwork with my mom and myself, is like it took about 2 years to complete it all. And somewhere in between 2000, I want to say August 2012 to October 2013, I was literally working with recruiters, and that was no less than even, I want to see, less than 2 months before I even walked into the recruiter's office and said, "Hey, here's my social security card, here's my green card, here's my birth certificate. I'm not a U.S. citizen, but I am a legal person. What can I do to be able to finally join the military?" And someone's like, "Hey, you have everything that you need that you didn't have in the past. Here's what we can do." And obviously, without getting into specific details, they offered me a job. I got into the delayed entry program, and then that was the first situation that let me know, hey, after the fact, I want to say this now, after the fact, after I've already been in service, that is like, hey, there's a lot of misinformation in joining the military from the very start. So, like I said, I thought, hey, immediately you get into military service and you're able to do whatever you want when you want. And then it wasn't.
Pause it real quick. Was it in your contract? Was it at all? Is there a check in the box where, citizenship at all? Is there something big in the contract? I don't think so, right?
No, there's not. There, as I can remember, there are questions that say, are you legally allowed to reside in the United States? Do you have a social security card, or do you have not ATN number, an A number, an alien resident number, right? And that's one of the things that I provided with having the green card. But there's nothing specific that says, hey, you as a off the street civilian that are joining the military as a legal resident, once you sign this dotted line upon completion of boot camp or entering into boot camp, you get automatic citizenship. Like, no. So the biggest misconception with that is that they're two completely different parts of the entire U.S. government. It's broken down into subsections upon subsections, right? But working the United States Customs and Enforcement Service, USCIS, is the ultimate body that controls the process of citizenship, along with the visa process in tandem with the Department of Homeland Security. The National Visa Center falls under the Department of Homeland Security. So two completely different systems that somehow tie into the Department of Defense, right? And that's the thing, that's the biggest misconception, is like people think the government is the government. You join the military, you're part of the government. You work for the Pentagon, you're a part of the government. You go into politics, you're part of the government, but it's not that. So I didn't learn that until actually I was in boot camp. So like I said, nothing in my, like you said, nothing in my contract, no check mark saying, hey, you're going to be a U.S. citizen. Now, they offered it to us. So within like the first 2-3 days, they're like, hey, are there anybody here that are green card holders or that are want to be U.S. citizens? And that was even rare in 2013 because from other members, other service members, and other people that I've known, they didn't even know they could apply for citizenship until after the fact. So I got really, really lucky in that sense that my RDC, our recruit division commanders, drill instructors, basically said, hey, if you're here providing your service, we're basically going to help you and be able to get your citizenship. So that was the thing that happened with me. And they have the Navy legal right there at Great Lakes. They help you with filling out the paperwork, the N200 for military service. And the biggest difference between doing the the N200 for citizenship, which is the application for citizenship, the big difference between joining the military and getting your citizenship in the civilian world is that you have to be at least 5 years minimum as a legal resident, green card holder, before you can even apply for citizenship as a civilian. Versus if you are in the military and you apply for citizenship, you can get it automatically within a certain time frame. You technically have to qualify as a veteran after 30 days of service, active duty service, within boot camp and all that stuff. But they help you fill this out, and they even waive the charge, because most kids, and I say it not to degrade them on their experience, but like most are still kids when they join into the military. They don't have any idea of this. So some don't have money, some don't have any legal experience, much less any information about the ins and outs of the immigration system. So Navy legal helps them out and gives them the form, charges dismisses and waivers the charge itself, and then you get an interview later. So it was actually, think about maybe 2 or 3 weeks before I graduated boot camp that the immigration's agent actually came by and actually asked me the citizenship questions. They're like, hey, here's you completed your form, here's your guide. We'll give you a heads up in about a month and a half when an agent will come back to be able to do your oral test of the U.S. citizenship test. So did that, and then was sitting there in front of the agent, answered all the questions correctly, and then boom, congratulations. Hey, you qualify to be a U.S. citizen based off of your application, your information, and then just completing this oral test. Sign this paperwork, sign this here, and then we will let you know when your swearing in comes in. So that was literally less than 2 months from me joining the military to applying to citizenship and being approved, and then another month to be able to get sworn in down in Chicago, where Great Lakes, where I transitioned to from my training school, out of Great Lakes, literally across the street, and then went down to Chicago City Hall to be able to get sworn in by the immigration judge out there. So for me, in that whole entire process, literally took less than 3 months to become a U.S. citizen after joining the military. And it took even less time from me getting my legal residency about a year or so back to be able to join the military. Less than 2 months. So it's really just, I want to say, I guess it's more of a lot of hurdles than it is information available for people to have, and which causes a lot of like the misconceptions, the misinformation, and I guess roundabout ways of people being able to even know how the whole process works.
Sounds like there's been some improvements since you've been in, because I mean the vets I talked to came in post 9/11 era.
Mm-hmm.
They were under the impression that G.W. Bush Jr. Said that, hey, if you join the service, you can receive your citizenship. And a lot of them that I've talked to were like, oh yeah, I'm going to join the service. I'm going to go fight in Iraq. I was there during the invasion. And then when they come back, they get out, right? They're still dealing with their combat trauma. They forget to get their citizenship. And, there has to be some improvement. And it sounds like there is, as far as navigating, right? Now it sounds like when you went through boot camp, and then from boot camp 6 days later, you were a citizen. I think that's great. It sounds like we're making a lot of progress. But then those that don't kind of go through your path, It sounds like some of them maybe falling through the cracks, right? So how do we improve that process? Do we just make it automatic once you join the service that, if you're a legal resident, you meet this criteria, we're going to put you on a pathway to the citizenship? What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm going to say it first off, how you said you've talked to veterans that have ran into that situation. In me, the two people that I've interviewed, but also just the information I was able to gather from one, when I interviewed Danitza Patrick from Repatriate Our Patriots, was that same information. It's just like misinformation about the process itself. Like the fact that she was able to go all the way to Iraq multiple times, then come back, basically be undocumented for 2 years and not be able to receive her citizenship out of her military service, but through her marriage is like a little bit baffling, right? But that taking her entire whole story into mind is just that. Like there's a lot of misinformation or lack of information being given to service members that are in that legal status. So one thing that I think would be able to help out is making sure and understanding that one, as people, as anybody reaching out to military service, that they ask the correct questions or know where to ask the correct questions, right? The second thing is if there's any initiatives or any changes within the Department of Defense or War, whatever they want to call it now, is making sure that if you're having these service members, these people volunteer to be able to come into your service to be able to give back to the country, or to be able to try to advance their career, because it's still a job at the end of the day, to be able to provide them with the correct information, or at least the correct legal pathways to be able to not end up with however many of our other service members that have been combat veterans that have been deported for misdemeanor charges and have been in prison for for decades, to be able to get deported back to countries where they don't know or have never really been to or don't even remember is the second portion, right? Giving back to the community that keeps serving the community. So that's the second thing. And then the third one is I think they've already made a couple changes, but the immigration system itself. So USCIS, Department of Homeland Security, before all of what's currently going on, making some changes to the actual citizenship path process of it, right? Understanding that they need to really codify and make that complete solid black and white instruction or that HR bill, which I think is already passed or it's still in processing, that any service member comes in to serve, as long as they meet the minimum criteria, that they're automatically put in or put on a list or a system to be able to say, hey, these are the same members that are getting security clearances, right? Security clearances. They're doing intelligence jobs. They're out here driving ships. They're out here, handling information for other people. It's like, how is it that difficult for us to be able to get their information into a system or a way to be able to get them routed through the system to be able to get their citizenship for security reasons, for benefit reasons, and then things and other aspects of it that, they've done their time. They've served the country. Let's give them back that portion to solidify the fact like that your service wasn't just for the country, it was for yourself. And it's not in a selfish way. It's like, hey, you contributed, we will contribute back.
I think those are some really good insights that you gave, because I agree with you. I think that we owe a depth of service to help to go out of our way to help more veterans or service members to do that. Right? There's a Marine pastor in Texas. He was under the impression George Bush era that his citizenship was automatic. Comes back, right? He was there for the invasion in March of 2003 in Iraq. Comes back, goes through trauma, PTSD, which we didn't know what it was at the time. Ends up, getting to drugs, loses one of his daughters, and ends up relocating to Texas. Becomes a pastor, and last year he hasn't seen his siblings in Mexico ever, and so he went for the first time. And he comes back right before 4th of July, and ICE detains him. They said, you had these things on your record for 10 plus years, and So then they detain him for 6 or 7 days. His name is Julio Torres, and it was really eye-opening for me to understand that, okay, well, he went over there, he comes back, you detain him for 7 days, and then you tell him, okay, you have until whatever day or month this year of 2025 to leave the United States right now. And he's fighting. I talked to him a couple weeks ago. He was not sure if he was going to leave to Mexico, open up a church over there, or stay and fight. I advise him to stay and fight because a lot of other veterans or service members will look up to that as a case study and a case in point, right? Like, we have to find a way to establish some type of baseline to say, we are veterans or we've served, we deserve to be here just as everybody else does, right? We're not saying we're above other fellow citizens, but we've served the country. We put ourselves in harm's way to defend America. Let's work together. Let's make sure that we can streamline this process. His concern is, he has a family, he has grandchildren, and our politicians have not been receptive to that because they think they equate veteran citizenship or deportation with deportation. It's not a deportation issue. It's actually a veteran issue, right? To your point, right? It is a federal process that has not been streamlined yet, and I was hoping that the whole Doge thing was going to streamline this process, and we're still here today and not streamlined yet. So I think that we have some work to do. As me, what I would do, I don't know. I have to look up that bill. I'm not too sure if it's passed or not, because I think that would have been, I would have known about that if I would have. But, so we should probably look into what that bill is and what it entails. I know they proposed quite a bit of bills in the past, and they've died because they always equate those bills with immigration. They don't brand it as a veteran issue, and they don't tell the veteran story per se. But I do think that's good. That's a step in the right direction. I just don't believe that they're not looking at it from a veteran's perspective yet. And so we got to figure out why not. Like, why doesn't it matter? Because the military or the government uses the military as an extension of diplomacy. It's force deterrence, it's strategic deterrence. War is just the exhaustion of diplomacy. That's all it is. And so the military comes in for kinetic purposes. So very strategic on how they do that. So if you're trying to raise an army because there's another country that is threatening your livelihood, you're probably going to want those people to join the service. Historically, it's been that way forever. They always give incentives. I think this should be a right, citizenship through service. I don't think it's a nice to have anymore. I think it has to be something we should potentially solidify in some type of legislation or put it in the contract where you will get automatic citizenship. I think it's simple. I think we overcomplicate it. The bureaucrats overcomplicate it, and I think it's something we have to continue to push for, and the message, and to make sure that let people know that thousands of veterans have been deported. To your point, why would we deport military veterans that are trained in intelligence, handling equipment, secrets, tactics, training, procedures, and they can just share that intellectual property, if you will, with a foreign country who may not agree with our way of life? That makes no sense. Like, why would you do that? To me, I deem that as a national security threat. So we should probably not get sloppy in doing those things. The other thing is, I feel that we need to do better, the community, to get the word out about these things. For some reason, like to your point earlier, people need to be more assertive. If you're a veteran or service member, ask questions, ask them, advocate for yourself. If you want someone to advocate for you, you got Jose. He's a great case study. He's navigated the process. He seems like a no BS nonsense guy based on me getting to know him, and he's very passionate. And I'm grateful to know people like that who are willing to advocate for others who may not be able to advocate or don't want to advocate for themselves. So this is one of the big things we focus on here on TVC, is giving people a voice. And it's great that you are using your voice purposely, Jose. what I'm curious for knowing what you've been through. What are you going to kind of focus on once you hang up the uniform? Because it sounds like you do have a sense for community and advocacy. I know we talked a little bit before that you were going to kind of go into the EMT field, but I see that you have a lot more potential than that. So I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying you should consider a lot more than just being an EMT. Nothing wrong with that. I got law enforcement people in my family, but this is me putting on my big brother hat right here, and saying you should definitely consider more options, because it sounds like you have the passion, you got the knowledge, you got the ability to advocate for others when challenged, and you're able to push back. We need more of that. We need people as a collective to be able to build together. Right? There is nothing greater than a team or a community or a movement to be able to drive progress forward. Right? And you come from the Navy background, right? Cesar Chavez was a Navy veteran, right? I come from the Central Valley. I had his son, Andres Chavez, on a couple months ago when they were talking about renaming his grandfather's ship. And fortunately, they didn't do that, which is great. I'm glad to hear that did not happen. For that perspective. So let's talk a bit about your plans, because this is what I'm so excited about having you on is, as veterans, if a veteran does not successfully transition out into their post-military career, we feel like we failed you. Not the system, but us, because we didn't grab you hold on, because a lot of times you get a battle buddy assigned to you that you probably didn't like or choose of your liking. But in the military, in the civilian world, there's no battle buddy. Like, there's no someone that says like, "Hey, Jose, you need to do this, 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 this." No, it's you and you. So I want to talk about that perspective. Let's talk about kind of what are your thoughts are. What are you going to be looking to do? What are your goals? What are your objectives? Let's dive into that.
Man, well, on a professional standpoint, I mean, like you said, I'm doing the EMT course one, still trying to get back to the community. I'm not really too specific, want to get too specific on that, but I'm doing that. I'm doing that because it's like I feel like my training in the military, whatever small bits and pieces that I got out of it, are useful to be able to still help out the civilian world. Helping out my neighbor, helping out anybody that's in an accident. So, doing that just for my, expanding my repertoire. I want to have my resume as stacked up as much as possible from that. And then on top of that, just, expanding the podcast that I do, the passion project, because I get nothing out of it. I'm not asking for anything out of it. I don't even have a large following. I can tell you that much. But what I use it as is to be able to just continue to have an open platform to tell people stories, and not just necessarily veterans or immigrants or whoever fits a specific demographic. I want to be able to interview a lot more people and to be able to get their stories out of the way. And now if some way and somehow they all intersect in that way, there's like, it's a veteran, they're an immigrant, and they've suffered through certain situation. Well, you know what? That's a 3+ for me right there. Like, we're hitting very specific points. And then outside of that, it's like, I don't know, in reality, I don't know how else to put it out there. Just like, I'll advocate as much as I can about the things, like you said, that I'm passionate about, and immigration, veterans reform, veterans issues, and then just storytelling are the biggest things. So I'm still within the transitioning point, and trying to get my feet under me, trying to see how solid the ground is. And I want to continue to try to help out people in the best way possible. And like, maybe in a couple months or so, depending on how situations work, I might actually have a lot more of a plan. But as of right now, that's basically all I'm working on. Just one, getting myself set up in the civilian world. Two, continuing the podcast and continuing to reach out to people, and then just inform as many people as possible. If you have questions or concerns or anything, it's like, I mean, like you said, I've navigated the immigration system 3 times. One for myself, once for my mom, and then once for my dad. And then currently in the 4th, to be able to do with everything that's going on with the immigration situation with my brother. So it's like, I have a pretty big, I don't have the experience, but I have experience to be able to help out. And it's a lot of things like that. And then same thing with what do you call it, with production and independent media. I wanted to be an artist. I'm still considering that, but it's one of those things where it's like, hey, I've navigated two full productions, two full productions. I've been at it doing the ESL Sessions podcast for 5 years, and then just recently started a new music podcast to be able to give independent artists a promotional reels as of just a couple months ago. So, just there's opportunities and things for me to be able to expand. It's just a matter of time. But yeah, that's currently what I'm looking at right now.
I think it's incredible. The fact that, again, you said give independent artists, ESL production, EMT. Those are all service. It's your service, man. It's your servant leadership ability to do that. It's also a form of advocacy, right? It's why I started this podcast. To do that, I wouldn't necessarily focus on too much on the following. Jesus had 12 disciples. Now he has billions, 2 billions, right? Just saying, it's going to happen when you have something to say. People are starving for wisdom right now in America, right? They're so focused on being materially rich, but they're missing the ball. I'm going to invite you over to come to the 15th annual Veterans Small Business Trade Show in Moreno Valley next year. I'd love for you to kind of just be there. Maybe we can get you on stage for a little bit just so you can tell your story. And so you can meet the founder, fellow Marine. He's the one, actually, the reason why I finally filed my VA claim. I was that hard charging Marine after 2012. I wanted nothing to do with the Marine Corps. And now I'm like, oh, wait. He's like, no, Jeff, why do you feel that way? I was like, well, maybe someone. No, you earned it. You deserve it. And I was like, I earned it. I deserve it. So he's the one, and a lot of veterans have been pumping me up to do that. And so I finally did it, right? I did it, submitted my claim 2 weeks ago to do that. But I'd like to invite you to come out there because he has a 100-year plan. He says, in his words, he says, I don't care how much money I got in the bank account. I don't care how many material possessions that I have, but what I do care about is that I made the difference in the life of a child. So we're talking about the future. He has a 100-year plan, and you're part of that, Jose, because your child, your child's child in the future. What you do today is going to have an big impact on them, just like your father did through his service, or your grandfather did. So this is bigger than us, and I challenge you to continue to do that. Being a voice, being an advocate, showing people that it can be done to navigate the system. I've navigated the system before, and I love it. I love it when I win. It feels good. But where I fail is if I don't share that knowledge with others. I don't share that wisdom with others. So if there's a way you can share that and you have the ability to do that, do that. Bring others up with you. That is something that for some reason the civilian world hasn't gotten yet. And so we got to find a way to make sure that we take those good traits that we learned in the service and we also carry that out in the business world or the corporate world or the civilian world, whatever it is that you do. I want to learn more about this ESL podcast. Where can I find it?
Gotcha. Well, I'll definitely be interested in going into that conference. Just we can definitely talk offline off of that and get some information. But to bring it back to that, the ESL Sessions podcast is, like I said, I started off as a passion project to be able to get my story out there, right? Bits and pieces and things like that. But it evolved into getting everybody else's story out there too. So the ESL Sessions podcast, I have it written down. Sorry, I have it split up into 3 different segments. So you have the ESL Sessions, which is just the regular episodes talking on specific topics and getting people's opinions. That one is more just gear based, opinionated based. The second portion of it is Enigma. So the ESL Sessions presents Enigma, which I take one individual without any ties to anything specific. Just I want to tell them to tell their story. And it focuses on their life experiences and asking them about how things that have happened shape their life. And, every single person is an enigma. That's the main reason for the name of the segment. There's very little to understand, and there's very little things to be said about the word enigma in itself, as I say in the intro. And every single person is enigma. So, getting to know that, deciphering it. And then the last portion is En mi comunidad. The ESL Sessions presents En mi comunidad, in my community. And in that one I get to be able to talk to more professionals, right? Get into their information and get their outlook on how their experiences and everything that they've done led them to either start a business, start a channel like yourself, your experience and everything to do the TVC, the Veterans Club podcast and things like that. And like I said, those touching on the three specific things, right? We're all gonna have an opinion. We need to know about somebody random, and then we definitely need to reach out and talk to our communities, talk to everybody that's in our communities or communities that matter. So that's the main thing with the ESL Sessions podcast is, like I said, it's a platform. It's a platform, very independent, very small, but with a purpose of getting the voices out there, not just my own, but everybody else's out there.
Powerful stuff. And I'm going to make sure to subscribe, and I'm going to make sure that those are going to be listening to this, subscribe to that. As you can tell, he has an amazing voice. He has a radio voice. I love it. I think he has a lot of gifts. And I am so glad that you're sharing those gifts with the world. Many people hold back those gifts and they rob the world of that. But the fact that you are sharing that. So as we get ready to wrap up, Jose, I'm gonna salute you. I thank you again for wearing the uniform. How can we help you successfully navigate another chapter of your life?
In general, just be available. That's it. Community is the biggest thing that I think we as veterans, well, I guess me soon to be veteran, but us in the military field, and like I guess in any profession that you'd really take as a big portion of your life is just being available. We all have battle buddies, we all have friends available in any places, but like if the community is available, I think that's the best way to be able to help anybody out. Is knowing that if you have questions, you have concerns, or if you have any type of grievances, or you need somebody to talk to, or just somebody to just waste time with, just have an availability. And then the second is just like you said, is knowing that you have somebody else to rely on as well. I'm available for anybody that needs to be that needs talking to, that needs help with, that needs talking with, or mentorship, or even for me to be able to find somebody. It's just the same thing. Just the biggest thing is communication.
Well said. And I'm going to say it again. Showing up is half the battle. Mm-hmm. Being available. You could not have said it any better. So if those of you who really like today's show, please make sure to subscribe, like, and comment, and share the TVC podcast, but also share the ESL podcast. I have a feeling, and I'm going to put this into the ether, that Jose is going to come on many more times, and I feel like there's going to be some collaborations happening because he has a very powerful voice. So Jose, thank you again for joining us on TVC.
No, well, thank you very much, Jeffrey. I'm here available, and like I said, thank you for the opportunity to get to know you a little bit more, and then just having this opportunity to be able to get my stuff out there in the ether, like you said. So thank you.
Absolutely. TVC.